Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe and 1,000 different practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that we can use as we go through the 21st century. And at the same time, we're looking at 144 different nations and all continents, including Antarctica, to just see how that we're going to be able to proceed as we go towards 2050 and adding 2 billion new people to the planet. So as we have 9 billion souls, how we're going to be able to provide the food, the fuel, the fiber, and the basic infrastructure that's needed for each and every one. We have a group in New York at the United Nations at number 2 United Nations Plaza that's working on solving all of these issues and addressing the problems that we'll be facing as we add these new people to the planet. We have on first, coming in by Skype, is Dr. Ibne Hassan. He is the president of the World Association of Former United Nations Interns and Fellows, WAFUNIF, and he's coming here by Skype. And then we have Liliana Bukur, who is a research fellow that will be coming on if we need to have a special guest in case we lose connection by Skype. Dr. Hassan, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you, and you're doing absolutely outstanding work there, sir, in New York through WAFUNIF. And tell us, what does the association do, and a little bit of its history.
WAFUNIF came in response of the United Nations' desire to involve its international work the younger generation, so that there may be a continuity of the Charter aims and objects and the creation of leadership among the coming generation.
I tell you, I think... Go ahead.
Because of that, this organization came into existence to create a community of younger people and continue the work of the United Nations and promote its ideals.
Well, I tell you, having visited with you at the United Nations, you really are doing fantastic work. And I had a chance to meet a number of the interns and the fellows that you have there. And they're making a special impact all across the globe. So what would you think are some of the major accomplishments of WAFUNIF?
United Nations accomplishments are numerous, but if you single down to one most important contribution to the world affairs and world security and peace is the averting the Cuban Missile Crisis. At that time, United States and Soviet Union came to the brink of unleashing the nuclear war, and that was averted because of the United Nations intervention at that time during the Secretary General of UN, and that was the most important contribution besides so many.
Well, I tell you that, and we can remember those days, and there were some harrowing times. So looking at your organization, what are some of the greatest accomplishments in this activity to build community around the globe through the interns and the fellows?
Our contribution has also been in the matter of peace and security, and we had been engaged from our very inception in this particular area. And in recognition of our efforts all around the world, side by side the United Nations, we were recognized by the United Nations of our efforts and sincerity to bring peace in the world, and that contribution, and we were granted our Peace Messenger Certificate or Award, which was one of the most important recognition. And we are proud of it, and we are contributing on the same lines and spreading it further and further.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and people are always asking what is, the main goal of Emerald Planet, and we say world peace, and so we're running in tandem along that way, Dr. Hassan. Looking at the WAFUNIF and this World Peace Messenger, tell us a little bit about that program. It's very important. What does it mean, and how is your organization addressing to actually achieve some of those goals and objectives?
Goals and objectives are numerous. As I said, that the peace and security is the basic factor and basic nucleus of our program. Nevertheless, side by side with the United Nations, we are indulged in so many other programs: disarmament, peace and security, environment, ecology, human rights, and all those programs, and the development, sustainable development, that also include in our program. And that, of course, changes according to what is happening in the world. That is what the United Nations has been doing. Our responsibilities with the time increase, and so do of the United Nations. So we follow the United Nations ideals and United Nations workings. So our activities are also expanding with the expansion of the United Nations activities.
Well, I think with your level of energy and the wisdom that you've gained over these many years, that's why that your organization, WAFUNIF, is really getting this international recognition, and congratulations on that. What do you think needs to be done to further enhance the image of the United Nations in the United States, but also around the globe?
About the United Nations now, as the growing responsibilities are there, and United Nations very efficiently or energetically responding to all the changing challenges in the world. Main thing is that United Nations is not discouraged, and so is WAFUNIF. We are not discouraged with growing responsibilities and growing challenges, and United Nations has been able to cope with all these problems. The people who work for the United Nations and all the agencies of the United Nations are very vigilant about these matters which are taking place around the globe, and they have not only they have the responsibility, but they have the capacities. People who come to the United Nations have great energy and responsibility, commitment for the world peace, for world development, but peaceful development. And they want to avoid those things which are negative. So it was a positive image in the beginning of the United Nations to look towards the globe, and so is today. And in future, we expect more and more so, because nobody within the United Nations system is discouraged. They want to do it.
Well, I think many of the people that I've met there's just hundreds of years worth of experience and wisdom in the United Nations and also within your organization, WAFUNIF. So we're all blessed to really have you. Looking at what do you see for maybe any special changes or reforms and the long-term impact of these reforms among the United Nations and its operations globally and also within specific countries?
There are many programs which have been forwarded from the very inception of the United Nations for the reforms. But the United Nations itself, in a sense, reforming in response of the responsibilities which come to it. But reforms as generally and specifically are forwarded and advanced through many organizations and many governments also. Presently, There are many programs, but I mentioned only one which is in the fall presently under the aegis of Ford Foundation, Yale University, Oxford University, and Stanford University. They are promoting and trying to influence the governments to have those reforms. And reform do not mean, because the governments themselves have their own interest. So outside the United Nations, the neutral bodies are trying to bring those reforms in which the United Nations can become more effective, and they promote the charter ideals as far as possible. As you know, the charter itself has not been very much amended except what has been done and created through the practice, and that practice itself exists within the United Nations. The system is such, it is itself creative in the sense of world problems. So far, the specific countries are concerned. Of course, there are organizations that look for the member states, other countries which are outside, and also world as a whole. Their program is for the world, not for any specific country, even though they realize that any problem which comes, it is the responsibility of the United Nations to address it as effectively as possible. So United Nations does not have any magic wand, but nevertheless, they have the resources, especially intellectual resources, and the resources of the committed people, and they address any program which come to it, any problem which come to it, as far as possible. Of course, the problems are growing and resources are shrinking. Nevertheless, there is a bright future in a sense that the capacity is there.
Okay, Dr. Hassan, we have only about 20 seconds. So very quick answer. What do you see for the future of WAFUNIF and the UN for the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Future, as I mentioned already, is taking up the challenges and the problems with open heart, which United Nations has been doing, and so is doing WAFUNIF. Without any discouragement, future is difficult because the problems.
All right, sir, we're running out of time. This is Dr. Ibne Hassan, who is the president of the World Association, the former United Nations Interns and Fellows, WAFUNIF. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip@aol.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America, and reading is fundamental.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products as we move forward to the end of the 21st century. And as we head to 2050, how we're going to be able to take care of a planet with 9 billion souls. We have a gentleman who's been working in this area, thinking about it, and collaborating with the United Nations for a number of years. Joining us by Skype is Dr. Valdemar Prado, who is a senior fellow at the World Association of Former United Nations Interns and Fellows, WAFUNIF, and also he is the executive director of Gliese Group of New York City. And then we do have a special guest as a backup in case we lose Skype. That's Liliane Bucour, who is a research fellow and international affairs and planning of WAFUNIF. Dr. Prado, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV. Okay, I'm not sure we've got his mic on. So anyway, we're looking at the WAFUNIF. This is a very wonderful organization. I met Dr. Prado, who is very much involved in the activities at the 2 UN Plaza in the United Nations. And Dr. Prado, I think we have your sound back. Welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And I want to say publicly it was a great pleasure to work with you in New York City. You do a very fine job.
Likewise, thank you. Likewise.
Thank you again. Anyway, tell us, as a former fellow, what is a fellow to start with? And obviously you've been involved for a number of years with WAFUNIF. So tell us about what is a fellow, your involvement, and then the organization itself from a perspective of an intern and a fellow.
Our organization has two types of members. One is the interns that come every year to the United Nations, about 3,000 per year. And after they do an internship in different areas, diplomacy, economics, and health, and, the different areas of work for the United Nations. And also we have, besides these graduate students who come to do their internships, who become members of our organization, we have the fellows. Fellows are basically professionals who come to the United Nations to do some type of research or assessment, or sometimes consultancies. And we can become part of the organization also. Our organization mainly is an academic organization. We are the Alumni Association of the United Nations.
Yeah, it's a mighty work that you're doing, and it's amazing because you have, as you said, some 3,000 of the interns and a number of fellows every year. That's a tremendous number of people representing almost all the countries on the planet on a year-to-year basis. So that's a fantastic outreach. So how do you substantiate the progress of WAFUNIF over the number of years that it's been in existence?
Our organization, like many other organizations, has a life cycle. And of course, it started very modest with a few interns and the first people who came to do internships at the United Nations. And over the years, it has reached different stages that any organization like ours goes through. In our case, I think our organization has reached maturity in the sense that originally our mandate is to promote the work of the United Nations in the different areas among the civil society. When the United Nations was formed, it was thought of as the governments of the planet coming together in order to preserve peace and security and also development. But the civil society was not represented. So there was a good part of the United Nations who is, let's say, half and half, Part is the governments who usually fund the United Nations, but also the civil society. The civil society has a representation at the United Nations and it has a voice. And part of the mandate of our organization, besides becoming the Alumni Association of the United Nations, it's also to promote the work of the United Nations all over the world in its different phases.
Well, I tell you, it's really a challenge when you're trying to engage, again, going back to 3,000 interns in a year and having them constantly involved and then keeping them involved throughout the years of their professional lives. That's a real challenge. But, you know, the world is changing at a very rapid rate with the internet and the things that are going on in Eastern Europe and Africa, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. And so what do you see as the potential for the interns and fellows, this organization that's at the UN? What do you see for the future of WAFUNI and how it's going to expand and adapt and grow and change to all these different situations that are going on around the planet?
Most of the situations that you have these days around the planet are triggered in most cases by interests that are not always the interests of the people. You know, big corporations, greed, corruption are all involved in this type of situations that we see that create violence and also threaten human life. Our work is through education. We participate in programs like the Culture of Peace and other programs that the United Nations has. And we try to create awareness among the population that the common individual, the people, they have a saying in these processes, in these problems that are happening all over the world. And many times, you know, people cannot do anything because they are drawn into these conflicts and into these situations because of propaganda or because of ignorance or because the powers of being have other interests that not always going hand in hand with the interests of common individuals. So our work is through education to promote awareness of how the people have the power to stop these conflicts by recurring to tools like dialogue and solving problems by diplomacy, and that is basically what the United Nations role is. So we help through our interns to make the population aware that from the bottom up we can put pressure on the governments and the interests of corporations to pay more attention to the interests of people and work together with the interests of people so that we can live better and we can improve the living conditions, especially of those people who cannot speak for themselves.
Yeah, looking at your organization being a United Nations Peace Messenger, which is an extremely high honor, and congratulations for that. Expand a little bit on that, Dr. Prado, on how that the UNEP can actually help to expand and at the same time enhance the diffusion of tensions in various countries around the globe.
As the name implies, we were one of the first organizations who were granted this title, this honorific title of Messengers of Peace. And as I said in the beginning, originally the United Nations was created to work in three different areas of action. One is the security of nations to avoid conflicts and wars. Second is the promotion of peace. And third, the promotion of development. These three vectors of the United Nations work are very important in order to have improvement in the living conditions in the planet, especially in the areas of security and peace. But also those areas cannot be if we don't have development in the population. If the population doesn't have or don't have the means to have a decent living, a roof over their heads, access to education, and things like that. So there is a program at the United Nations that is called the Program of Cultural Peace, and this program was created in order to stop violence, especially the violence against women and children. Mm-hmm. And this work is promoted through 9 or 10 items, such as educating people on how to preserve peace, to promote social development, to promote the human rights, to promote equality between men and women, to have democratic participation among the population, to promote tolerance and solidarity, and to promote the free flow of information and knowledge, and to promote peace and security. Mm-hmm. So these are the mandate that we have as peace messengers, and all of our members do that work when they go back to their countries, their respective countries, and also they go back. Usually they are sent to the United Nations by their governments. They go back to the governments, and eventually they become individuals that sometimes they become prime ministers or presidents that we have among the members of our organization. And through them is that we promote our work. We have members in 152 countries.
That's incredible. What a number. Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And looking at the funding source, I think you said that the governments actually provide the funds, and we're getting down to the end. I know that the work is very important, both back in their home countries and also within the United Nations there in New York. We're running out of time, about 20 seconds, Dr. Prado. What do you see for the future of your organization over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Okay, basically the governments don't provide funds to our organization. We need the funds from donations yes. And I see a very bright future because we will have more members and there will be more problems to work on. And we hope to put our grain of sand in whole building of.
Fantastic. This is Dr. Valdemar Prado, who is the Senior Fellow, World Association of Former United Nations Interns and Fellows, and is Executive Director of his own consulting group. And thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Yeah. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. There's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire!
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And one of those areas that we have to be very concerned about as we add 2 billion new people to the planet by 2050 is the area of education, both K-12 from kindergarten all the way through high school, and then of course university. We have a gentleman who is very actively involved in all of this work, not only in New York City through Hunter College, but also around the globe. This is Dr. William Milczarski, who is a professor of urban affairs and planning at Hunter College in New York City. And also we have a special guest backup in case we lose William by Skype. Dr. Milczarski, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dr. Hancock. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. You did a very fine job at the United Nations, and it was a great pleasure being there with you on that. Tell us a little bit about your department, the Urban Affairs and Planning, and then also about Hunter College itself.
Hunter College is part of the City University of New York. 10 senior colleges, 8 community colleges, a law school, a medical school, a graduate center, over 100,000 students. It's one of the biggest public urban universities in the world. My department has 2 graduate programs, one in urban affairs, one in urban planning. We get students from across the nation and around the world. And we have an undergraduate major in urban studies. And like New York itself, Hunter College is one of the most diverse institutions in the world. And also one of the great things it does, that the whole City University does, is train people who in most cases are the first in their family to go to college. So it's a challenge, but a joy to teach every day when I go there.
Well, one of the things that's going on, if I can call you William, if you don't mind,
Please do.
It's you know, the fact of all these people that are coming to you and then populating not only New York City, New York State, but the globe, as far as sharing their skills, and in many countries that have a real need for this kind of education and training. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which is aside from the ones that we had talked about earlier, is what are the impact that you're seeing from your graduates as they come out of your program and they go on to work at the United Nations and literally thousands of other places around New York and around the globe?
The word that's on the tip of every graduate student's tongue in urban planning is sustainability. We teach a course in sustainable transportation. When we talk about housing, when we talk about the environment, sustainability is what we care about. The students who are coming to us, and I would say not just us, but most graduate programs in urban planning in the United States are coming to us because they're concerned about the future of the planet. They're concerned about the future of cities, great cities like New York. But that can only happen if we shepherd our resources carefully. And I'm proud to teach these students. It sounds like a cliche, but I learn so much from them every day. They come from extraordinary backgrounds, and they care deeply about the future of New York City, all cities, and the globe.
Well, I tell you, it's incredible. I know that the special Skype backup tonight, this is Liliana, is one of your graduates there, and she is absolutely outstanding and doing great work with WAFUNIF. So if that's an example of your graduates, you've had a long and storied history there in New York at Hunter College. Tell us a little bit about the trends, both for population and transportation, that you're seeing through urban affairs and planning through Hunter College.
Well, that conference we were both at a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Hancock, was about sustainability, about climate change, and the role of transportation in climate change. The statistic that I'm hearing most is about 23% of all greenhouse gas emissions are due to motor vehicles. Now, this chart that's on the screen here, I hope it doesn't take me too long to explain it. There's 5 lines here. They're all indexed to start at 100 in 1960. And as you can see, going from the bottom to the top in the United States, there's been growth in population. We know that. Even more rapid growth in households. The line above that is drivers, more and more drivers. The line above that, which is maybe a little scary, is the number of motor vehicles in the United States, trucks, 4-wheel vehicles, and cars and light-duty trucks and things like that. And then the top line is vehicle miles traveled. And so all of those lines are going up, and the 2 at the top more than all of them. Now, I'm not sure whether we should be heartened by the end of those 2 top lines, which look like they flattened out. Some experts think that that might be the beginning of a long-term trend. Others think that's just a result of the Great Recession that we've just gone through. I hope the first group of experts are right, but I think we're going to have to see what's going on in a few more years. The one thing we do know is that the middle line, drivers, there seems to be there's some data that's come out of the University of Michigan that says that the number of young people getting their driver's licenses is going down. There's lots of reasons why that might be so. As you've mentioned, the internet is revolutionizing things. They might be spending more time communing with their friends via Facebook or on the internet, and they're just not driving as much. Plus, there's data that says that young people care more about the environment than older generations. So that's hopeful, but these trends are something we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, looking at this, William, the fact of, in Washington, D.C., it's about 37% of the people that live here now do not even have automobiles. And of course, they're using cars to go, and, the various ride shares. More and more people are using bicycles, mass transportation, and even walking. But there seems to be actually less interest in the automobiles, as they are, as you said, more concerned about the environment and what it is that we're doing to the environment with all these vehicles, and of course all the new construction, which even higher emission of greenhouse gases. So looking at the motor vehicles here per 100,000 population, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in this particular situation?
This is data from the World Bank, 21 countries around the world, picked for a couple of reasons. One, so I covered various regions in the world, got a mix of developing and developed nations, but also ones where I had a consistent database, 2001 to 2011. Now, the tall columns shouldn't come as a surprise. Australia, the United States, the developed countries have lots of motor vehicles per 1,000 people. The interesting thing, though, if you look at the United States, maybe we've sort of peaked. One could hope that we're saturated with motor vehicles. It's the countries that have the shorter columns that I think we have to think about. If you look at, for example, China with approaching 1.4 billion people, India approaching 1.3, Indonesia with 250 million people. In 2001, they had very low numbers in terms of motor vehicles per 1,000 population. And compared to the developed countries, they're still low. But it's the growth trends that we have to worry about. I did some back of the envelope calculations this morning. And if China, India, and Indonesia just get to half of where the United States is today, just 400 motor vehicles per 1,000 population, by the year 2050, that would add 1 billion additional vehicles to the planet.
That's absolutely incredible to have that. What do you think are some alternatives from the research you're doing at your department, the Urban Affairs and Planning at Hunter College, about how maybe we can help to reverse this, or how the United States maybe can be a leader in showing a new way, a new path as far as transportation is concerned? And something to throw in, this is something that I know that you've talked about in your presentations, is that the world is rapidly urbanizing. The United States now is 80% urban. A country like Brazil is 87% urban population. So there's a huge population shift going on the planet as we go towards this 9 billion souls by 2050.
In terms of transportation, urbanization is a good thing. Dense settlement patterns are good. When you have density, you can support mass transit systems. When you have density, you have lots of uses where people can walk to those uses or bike to those uses. So urbanization certainly has its problems. There's crowding, there's problems with water and sanitation and crime. We understand what the urban problems are, but in terms of transportation, density is a good thing. One of the things that my colleague, Professor Peter Tuckle of the Puncher Sociology Department, and I have been looking at for several years now, is the potential for walking. And there's a long history to this, and much of your audience is familiar with it after World War II, how in the US we suburbanized. We built the interstate highway system, we had low density development, and that promoted automobile use. The question is, can we change our settlement patterns, and can we educate people to make them understand, first of all, that walking is good for them. There's so much research and so much literature about the health benefits, both physical health and emotional and mental health for walking that's out there. But it's also good for their communities in terms of reducing driving, reducing fuel consumption, reducing emissions, reducing auto accidents. We have 4,000 pedestrians killed each year in this country, 40,000 people still killed in motor vehicle accidents. Less driving, more walking, more biking is a good thing, and our students are working on this.
Yeah, whenever time we have a chance to talk, there's never enough time, William. But just as the last question, what do you see as far as the growth of Hunter College and the work that you're doing in urban affairs and planning? And we only have about 30 seconds to cover that.
One of the things that's happened in my department, I'm happy, my colleagues are happy to say, is over the past 20 years, instead of just getting students from the New York metropolitan area, we're getting students from across the United States and around the world. They like coming to New York, they like learning from us, and we like sending them back to the rest of the country and around the world to promote sustainable development.
Well, this is Dr. William Milczarski, who is a professor of urban affairs and planning at Hunter College in New York City. And thank you for being with us. A very fine job, sir, and we look forward to having you back on the Emerald Planet. And thank you, viewers, for being with us as we look at the new trends as we create the Emerald Planet.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States on a weekly basis. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the Executive Director and host of the Emerald Planet, and also the President and Executive Director for the Emerald Planet International Foundation. We come to you on a weekly basis to bring you what we call the best of the best as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products as we move towards the 21st century. We have a gentleman who is actually very much working on this balance between the environment and the economy. This is Jamil Ahmad. He is a Deputy Director of the United Nations Environment Program. It's called UNEP. And he's headquartered in New York City at the UN. And we also have a special guest as a backup in case we lose Mr. Ahmad by Skype. This is Liliana Bukur. She's a research fellow of International Affairs and Planning of WAFUNIF organization, which is also part of the UN. Dr. Ahmad, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you very much.
Looking at your organization, tell us a little bit about what is the UNEP and some of the work that UNEP is doing at this time.
All right, thank you again. The United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP as we call it, is the lead UN agency which sets the global environmental agenda. It also promotes a coherent integration of the environmental dimension into the work of the United Nations, and it also serves at the same time as an advocate for global environment. We do it through our governing body, which is called the United Nations Environment Assembly, which has membership of all member states which are members of the United Nations. We also do our work through a number of other ways and collaborations. We collaborate with the scientific community, with the academia, with research institutes, with civil society, and with other UN agencies. And we partner with them to work on a number and a host of issues relating to the environment.
I tell you, it's fantastic the work you're doing, and we had a chance to meet together at the United Nations and looking at the carbon reduction, sustainable development, and so it was a great pleasure meeting you at that time. What do you see as some of the accomplishments of UNEP over the many years that it's been in existence, and also its expanded role as there's more and more awareness of climate change, and nations are becoming more concerned about that as a national security and international security issue. So it seems like the duties and the scope and scale of UNEP is expanding at a very rapid rate.
Yes, the UNEP is, as I said, the lead UN agency working on the environment, but its work has expanded over the past 40 years since UNEP was established in 1972. UNEP works on a number of different work streams. In the past 40 years plus, we have some success stories. For example, the ozone layer, which was damaged severely through a treaty, multilateral environmental treaty agreed in Montreal. UNEP has worked with the international community, and now more than 90% of the ozone layer has been repaired. We work in other areas such as chemicals, biodiversity, ecosystems, land degradations, forest, and air quality, and of course climate change is one of the main areas. UNEP has worked in all the regions, at regional level, at sub-regional level, and of course at the international level through different associations and to different partnerships. We also have a very robust engagement with the civil society, and we also work through the interagency mechanism of the United Nations. One of the major scientific body, the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is co-hosted by UNEP along with the World Meteorological Organizations, and we all know the work of the IPCC in putting forward credible scientific assessments on climate change.
Well, I think those are very important. The academics of this, the research, also the various international experts that you have coming to the United Nations, and that allows many countries to not only learn more, but at the same time to figure out how they need to address this, because it's a very real issue. So now that we've moved beyond the notion of whether there is climate change or not to how to address this, Mr. Ahmad, as far as natural phenomena, human footprint, carbon footprint of societal developments, what do you see as the official position of the United Nations and UNEP? And then how do we proceed to balance whether it's coming from human activity or it's a natural phenomena? We still have to address severe climate change.
Yes, as I said, UNEP is among the lead agencies which produces scientific work and which keep the environment under constant review through credible scientific assessments. The IPCC, which brings more than 2,000 scientists, produces these reports, and the fourth assessment report, which was issued in I think 2007, put it beyond doubt that there is climate change. Climate change is occurring, and the primary source for climate change is human activity. United Nations Environment Program, as I said earlier, supports the efforts of international community by engaging in various supportive actions at different and various levels. We have a clean air, climate and clean air coalition partnership where countries have come together to work on gases other than carbon dioxide, methane, black carbon, and soot. We have technology networks in various regions which are also supporting this work. Recently, 2-3 months ago, we decided on a decision at the United Nations Environment Assembly on the air quality. Air quality is another big danger to human health. More than 7 million people lose their lives annually to bad air quality. So we are working on all these different streams which are in support of the negotiations and the Climate Change Convention, which primarily is focusing on carbon dioxide.
Now, looking at some of these climate change summits that have been going on, you know, we've had them in Copenhagen and a number of other countries. Also, Rio Plus 20, the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development just several years ago. What do you see as the very practical applications? I know there's, many papers, many people talking about the research and the science, but what do you see on the ground as far as practical applications, either through nation states that are members of the United Nations or regional bodies that are actually working among nations within specific areas of the planet to address severe climate change?
Well, climate change is a global problem, and global problem will warrant a global action. United Nations and its various bodies provide a very credible and a legitimate framework for addressing this global problem. The United Nations offers the best, if not the only, forum where this global issue can be tackled, and it offers a platform where the international community can come together to work towards an agreeable stand and agreeable position on how to proceed to tackle it.
Yeah, looking at the United Nations, and this is a little aside, I'm going to expand one of the questions that actually I shared with you. But how do you see the United Nations as a forum where nations can come, they can talk about the issues, the challenges they have, but at the same time start changing the thinking, the processes, the attitudes, so that over time people really are starting to move together to bring about global change and to address some of these issues so that there is more of a balance between the environment and economic development?
Well, we in UNEP have a program called the Green Economy Initiative, and green economy is not a new thing to the world now. green policies are now adopted by many countries across the world. We have to change the way we live our lives. One way is to lead to sustainable patterns of consumption and production. The resources on this earth are limited, and our needs, we need to also control our needs in a way that we live in a sustainable manner. Unless and until we adopt this approach to production, to sustainable production and consumption, we will not be doing justice to the future generations.
Well, like the conference that we were working together on at the UN, there are a number of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, government agencies, but also private business that was very much involved. What are some of the collaborators that you have with UNEP, which brings all these different groups together and allows them to share the best of what they have as far as resources to address this issue, but at the same time to bring private business, NGOs, government agencies, and the citizens from around the globe together? And what are some of those organizations and private businesses that you may be collaborating with?
Well, I won't be able to name these business associations and this private industry, but we have a very robust collaboration with all these relevant stakeholders. The meetings of the United Nations Environment Assembly are not only attended by governmental delegations, but by all other stakeholders, civil society, private sector, banking, financial institutions, and UN agencies, youth and women. And we then have projects and programs which run in parallel to the governmental framework, to the governmental stream, where we engage in partnership with these associations.
Well, that's a very broad base, and thank you for sharing that with us. We only have about 2 seconds left, so we're going to be signing out very quickly. Never enough time to cover all the issues, but this is Jamil Ahmad, who is the Deputy Director of the United Nations Environment Program called UNEP, and he's actually headquartered at 2 UN Plaza in New York City, New York. And UNEP is doing absolutely fantastic work, and we've had some really wonderful speakers that are talking with us as we create an Emerald Planet.